It was the kind of night that could have slipped by unnoticed. The kind where everything felt normal, but just a little too quiet. The clock on the wall read 1:30 a.m., and the Burger King was as deserted as I had grown accustomed to during late shifts. The rain outside fell steadily, a constant tap against the restaurant windows. A soft hum from the fryers filled the air, and the occasional squeak of the mop bucket wheels broke the stillness as I wiped down the counters. The lights overhead flickered every now and then, casting a strange glow across the otherwise empty dining room. Through the windows, the streetlights created a dim halo over the wet pavement, but the streets themselves were eerily empty. Not a single car or person in sight. The quiet hum of the city seemed distant, muffled by the relentless rainfall. It was the kind of night where even the sounds of the world outside seemed to retreat, leaving everything inside to echo with the occasional clink of metal and the squelch of mop water. I was finishing up some cleaning, just the usual end-of-shift routine, when I noticed Mark, the manager, behind the counter. He looked tired, exhausted even, as he shuffled through the registers, cleaning up and counting the drawers. We exchanged a few words. Nothing special. Mark had been working at Burger King for years, and after all this time, the monotony of the job didn't seem to faze him as much as it did me. For me, it was just a temporary gig until I figured out what I wanted to do with my life. But for Mark, this was home. The night felt slow, almost unremarkable, until it wasn't. The doorbell chimed and I looked up. My first instinct was that it was just another late-night customer looking for a quick snack. But as I looked closer, I realized it wasn't just anyone. It was a man in a hoodie, his face obscured by a black mask. His movements were smooth, deliberate. He wasn't stumbling in for a meal like some late-night wanderer. He came straight to the counter with a purpose. "Give me all the cash. Now," he said, his voice low and menacing. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him, that this was some sort of joke or prank. But the moment I saw the knife, a small but dangerous blade that caught the light from the overhead lamps, I realized this was no joke. My heart raced, but my instincts kicked in. I had always been the calm one in emergencies, never one to panic, always ready to think things through. But even with all that, the situation felt out of my control. The man's eyes were cold, calculating. He was ready for something, and it wasn't going to be pleasant. He stepped closer, the knife now in full view, and I froze. The man's body language was tense, his grip on the knife tightening as he gave me the order again. "Open the register." I stood there, feeling my heartbeat echoing in my chest. My mind raced as I debated what to do. I didn't want to get hurt, didn't want anyone to get hurt. But I couldn't just hand over the money either without trying to reason with him. "Please, just leave," I shouted, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's no need for this." Mark had already stepped back, his face drained of color. He wasn't going to be much help in this situation. It was up to me, and I knew I had to keep calm, make the right move. I slowly moved to open the register, my hands trembling but my mind clear. I grabbed the money, pulling it out in slow motion as the man's eyes tracked my every move. The tension in the room felt like it was going to snap at any second. I handed him the bills, and without another word, he grabbed the cash, stuffed it into his coat, and bolted for the door. The whole exchange lasted only a few minutes, but it felt like an eternity. The door slammed shut behind him as he disappeared into the rain. I stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what had just happened, the weight of fear heavy in my chest. What had I just witnessed? Was it over? Or had I just become part of something darker than I could imagine? I snapped out of my trance and grabbed my phone, quickly dialing 911. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, but I could hear the urgency in her voice as I explained what had just happened. "Stay on the line. Help is on the way," she said. The police arrived shortly after. two officers entered the restaurant, taking control of the situation. They immediately started questioning both Mark and me, asking about the details of the robbery. I tried to recall every detail of the man's appearance, but everything happened so quickly that I couldn't offer much more than a vague description. I mentioned his hoodie, the black mask, and the knife, but that was it. They reviewed the CCTV footage, but the robber's identity remained unclear. His face was hidden, and the footage was grainy, offering no concrete leads. The officers scoured the parking lot and the surrounding streets, but nothing. The man had disappeared as quickly as he'd appeared, leaving behind no trace, no footprints, nothing. They offered little more than a sympathetic shrug, assuring us they would keep an eye on the area. But in a city like ours, robberies like this were rare, and the police didn't seem particularly concerned. I couldn't sleep that night. The adrenaline from the robbery kept me wired. But it wasn't just the fear of what had happened that kept me up. It was the thought that maybe, just maybe, the robber would return. I couldn't shake the image of his cold eyes as he demanded the money. Mark and I sat together in the break room, trying to calm our nerves. But the conversation felt forced, like neither of us really knew what to say. "I can't believe this. I thought we were safe here," Mark muttered, rubbing his face in exhaustion. I nodded in agreement but said nothing. I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel anything but fear. I went back to the security footage one more time, hoping for a clue. But all I saw was the same blurry figure. I thought about the man's movements. Quick, deliberate. He knew what he was doing, and he wasn't just some amateur criminal looking for a quick buck. He was professional, efficient, and he was gone before we even had a chance to react. The days that followed were full of unease. I couldn't shake the feeling that the robbery wasn't over. What if the man came back? What if he had more planned? I was constantly looking over my shoulder, always aware of every footstep, every shadow that seemed to move in the corners of my vision. I locked the front door carefully every night, feeling my hand shake as I turned the deadbolt. What if he came back? What if I wasn't ready next time? I called my friend Alex, needing to talk it out, but his calm voice only made me more anxious. "It's probably over, man. You're just stressed out. You've got to relax." I tried, but the fear kept gnawing at me. What if it wasn't over? What if the robbery was just the beginning of something bigger? My thoughts spiraled, and the unease settled in like a weight I couldn't shake. Then, it happened. Around 4 a.m., just as I was about to lock up the restaurant for the night, a loud knock came at the back door. My blood ran cold. I froze. Who could it be at this hour? I looked at Mark, and his wide eyes mirrored my own fear. He didn't need to say anything. We both knew this wasn't a coincidence. I crept slowly toward the back door, my hand trembling as I reached for the knob. I peeked through the small window. Nothing. No one was there. The rain still poured outside, but there was no sign of movement. I locked the door again, trying to steady my breathing. I had convinced myself it was just my imagination. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I couldn't shake the feeling that the robber was still out there, watching, waiting. As I left work that morning, the feeling of being watched didn't leave me. It stuck with me like a shadow, following me wherever I went. Even now, weeks later, I still feel the dread hanging in the air. Every time I walk to my car, every time I take a step outside, I find myself checking behind me, looking for someone in a hoodie, looking for the man who held the knife. But where is he now? Did he escape into the night? Or is he still watching? Was he alone? The unanswered questions linger, haunting me with their silence, and all I can do is wait and wonder if it's really over. It was a crisp evening, and the air outside had that chilly bite that signified the approaching winter. The wind was sweeping across the small town, scattering dry leaves across the empty parking lot. The golden rays of the setting sun cast long shadows, making everything look more melancholic. Inside Burger King, the hum of the fryers filled the air, and the sizzle of fries frying brought comfort in its regularity. I'd been working here for about a month now. The routine was easy, even comforting. Mr. Darrell, the manager, was a good guy, supportive, light-hearted. He kept the atmosphere light with his jokes, and the crew was like a second family. It was the evening shift, and Lena, a co-worker of mine who was a bit older but always kind and protective, was working alongside me. She always offered to give me a ride if I ever worked late, something I always appreciated. She was easy to talk to, and her presence helped settle my nerves after long shifts. Tonight felt normal. The only thing that stood out was the longer hours I was putting in to support my tuition. Working part-time wasn't ideal, but I managed it between my university work. Around 7:10 p.m., the door chimed, and a new customer walked in. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He was middle-aged, wearing a long black coat and a baseball cap, his face mostly hidden. His eyes were sharp and intense, and he seemed to be examining everything, especially me. He approached the counter, and the usual wave of nerves hit me. My voice was steady, though. "Can I help you, sir?" He didn't smile, didn't speak at first. After a moment of silence, he asked, "You here every day?" I blinked, confused at first, but then I gave him my standard response. "Just evenings, sir. What can I get for you?" He didn't seem to acknowledge that. Then, after another long pause, he leaned closer and asked, "You come here alone? Or someone picks you up?" The question caught me off guard. My stomach dropped, but I managed to keep my composure. Something about the way he said it sent a chill through me. I glanced over at Mr. Darrell, who was busy organizing the register. He caught the look in my eyes, but simply shrugged it off, thinking it was just another customer being odd. "He's probably just one of those weirdos who likes to talk to strangers," Mr. Darrell said, smiling. "Just ignore him. He'll probably be gone by the time we close." But despite Mr. Darrell's words, the man's gaze lingered longer than comfortable, and I couldn't shake the sense of being watched. Over the next 2 weeks, this man kept showing up. He'd order the same thing, just a small soda, and he would always sit in the same corner booth. And every time, his eyes would find mine. He never finished his drink. He just stared, watched. I told Lena about it, and she was just as unnerved as I was. Every time we passed by his booth to clean, he'd always be watching us, like he was waiting for something. But I couldn't figure out what. He never interacted with anyone else. He didn't talk to any of the other customers. He just stared. Then one night, while I was clearing tables, he leaned forward and whispered under his breath, "You shouldn't stay here this late. It's not safe." My skin crawled. I remember feeling my stomach twist in knots. I quickly finished cleaning the table and walked over to Lena, who had just finished making a batch of fries. She could see I was shaken. "What happened?" she asked, noticing my change in demeanor. I relayed the conversation to her, and she grew concerned. "Do you think he's following you?" she asked. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I was starting to feel like I was being targeted. So I went to Mr. Darrell, thinking I could get some advice or reassurance. "Creeps like that come in every now and then," Mr. Darrell had said, almost dismissively. "You're fine. Just don't engage with him." But the unsettling feeling lingered. Nothing about the man felt normal. One particularly late evening, after my shift, I was waiting at the bus stop. The streets were eerily quiet. The wind was howling, and I had pulled my jacket tighter around me as the cold air bit at my skin. I kept thinking about the man at the restaurant. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. And that's when it happened. A black sedan pulled up, and two men stepped out. They looked normal at first, but something about their presence made me uneasy. One of them gave me a polite smile. "Want a ride? It's freezing out here." I quickly shook my head, telling them I was fine, but they insisted. The man who'd smiled took a step closer, his eyes locking onto mine. Just as the situation was starting to feel threatening, an older man from the neighborhood appeared out of nowhere. His voice was loud and demanding as he yelled at the two men. "You two, get lost!" he shouted. "You think this is your playground?" The two men jumped back in surprise, quickly getting into the car and speeding off. The older man stayed with me until the bus arrived, making sure I wasn't left alone. I tried to thank him, but I was shaken. What had I walked into? Were those men just trying to help? Or was there something more sinister at play? That night, I couldn't shake the fear. I cried when I told my mom everything. The strange man at the restaurant. The two men at the bus stop. It was too much. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next day I quit my job at Burger King. I didn't want to work late shifts anymore. It wasn't just the fear of the strange man at the restaurant. It was the overwhelming feeling that I was being watched wherever I went. I couldn't live like that. I found a part-time job at a local cafe, closer to home. The shifts were smaller, the faces were familiar, and I thought I could finally find some peace. But every time I walked home, I kept glancing over my shoulder. Weeks later, after settling into my new routine, the feeling of being watched still lingered. I never mentioned the incident to anyone again, but it haunted me. I kept asking myself, what if the man at Burger King and the men at the bus stop were connected? And then I wondered, what if it was all a coincidence? I couldn't shake the idea that it wasn't over. That somehow, I had only escaped for a moment, and that the danger was still lurking. Every time I walked home, I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. The events of those weeks, those moments of sheer terror, had left a mark on me. I never took the same route twice. Each shadow that passed by seemed like a threat. And though I moved on and started a new chapter, there would always be that one question that lingered in the back of my mind. Was I truly free?